Chris is no stranger to introducing a lot of concepts and a lot of ideas that are biblically based to men just like us in this room. And as I said earlier, I emphasize the fact that he does that by modeling the behavior, not just by talking about it. And today, he's going to talk to us about a very timely subject in our lives, and that's legacy. He does a complete series on masculinity, which is a very profound series. I've been through it with him, and it's just wonderful. He's going to pick a couple of selections out of that today. The one around stewardship and one about real leadership. And he's going to share those comments with us today. Bless him. So, Chris, please join us. Please help me welcome Chris.
Morning, fellas.
Morning.
Morning. Thank you, Joe and Pastor Mike, Tom. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you fellows this morning. Also, I'd like to thank the folks who prepared the breakfast. Man, there's bacon. I'm convinced that bacon is God's gift to man. It's a glue that got you here this morning, I'm sure. How many of you would be watching College Game Day this morning if it wasn't for the bacon? Yeah, I would too. Don't you love fall, though? We were just talking this morning at the table how wonderful this time of year is. The weather's getting cooler, there's football. The kids are back at school, there's football. You don't have to mow the lawn as often, there's football. It's awesome, isn't it? So again, as I said a few minutes ago, I am pleased to be here this morning. I just want to thank Joe for giving me 3 hours to talk on this subject this morning, but I want you to know I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to narrow it down to 2 hours and 45 minutes.
So we can get to football. Huh?
Yes. Actually, this will take about 25 to 30 minutes. Today, I'm going to focus on 2 segments of masculinity. As Joe said, I typically have 10 segments in my presentation, but I'm going to focus on 2. And those 2 are wise stewardship. And the other one is real leadership. A part of God's design for every man. So I'd like to start off, and I'd like to plant a word this morning, and that word is legacy. Up on the screen here, you'll see Merriam-Webster describes legacy as a gift by will, especially of money or other personal property bequest. She left us with a legacy of $1 million. Something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor or from the past. Excuse me. The legacy of ancient philosophers who were left behind a legacy of pain and suffering. Basically, a legacy is something left behind. Now, along that line, as I was preparing for this week and thinking about legacy, I thought about a couple of men who died recently. One of them was John McCain, Senator of Arizona, and he died of a brain tumor. The other man was a gentleman by the name of Anthony Bourdain, who committed suicide by hanging himself. He did a show on CNN, traveling the world, kind of experiencing food in different cultures. And I started thinking, I wonder what kind of a legacy, now that they're gone, that they're going to leave behind for their children, their children's children, their grandchildren, and others. Probably very different. At the same time, what I'd like you to be thinking about this morning is, what will your legacy be like? How is your legacy being shaped? Because whether you like it or not, all of us are going to leave a legacy. Good or bad, we're all going to leave a legacy. So, the impact of your legacy will be reflected when you're gone with respect to your children, your grandchildren, and others. But what we do today, every day, every week, every month, is to shape that legacy by the decisions that we make and how we conduct our lives every day. So with that, I'm going to focus on, as I said before, wise stewardship and real leadership. So let me begin by saying that, gentlemen, there is a clear expectation from God, a very clear expectation, not a hope, not a wish, but a very clear expectation that we are to be wise stewards of the things and the resources He's put into our possession. It's an expectation, okay? If you look at the screen for a minute, I'd like to look at stewardship and how Merriam-Webster defines that. The office duties or obligations of a steward, the conducting supervisor or managing of something, especially the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care, stewardship of natural resources. So it's the management of it's the management of things that don't belong to you, but yet you're still being held accountable to manage them well. So we see that from the very beginning in Genesis, this concept of stewardship is introduced by God to Adam, where there's a clear expectation that Adam was to tend the garden. He had responsibilities. We have responsibilities as men with respect to taking care of the world that we live in. There's a clear expectation of stewardship. But today my focus under that umbrella of stewardship is going to focus on the financial piece of it. It's going to focus on the financial piece because it is so critical that we get this right. It's critical that we get this right because it not only affects us personally, but also has an impact upon your wife, your children, your grandchildren, and oftentimes people beyond your family. It could be relatives or others. We see the consequences of good and bad stewardship. You don't have to go any further than in Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30, where you have the parable of the talents. You have three guys. It's interesting here because the manager who's going to go away provides an expectation. He provides talents to three men. Notice that he doesn't give the same number of talents to each guy. He gives a certain number to the first guy, a certain number to the second guy, and he gives the third guy one talent. But the expectation is the same, and that is to do something with it. So the first two guys go out, they invest what was given to them from the manager. When the manager comes back, they present back to him not only what was given to them on loan, but they provided something even greater. And what does he say? Well done, good and faithful servant. Come on in. Not only am I grateful for that, but I'm going to bless you with more. They were well rewarded. The third guy comes in. He says, Master, I knew you were a tough guy, hard guy, so I buried it. And I'm going to give you back exactly what you gave me, nothing more. The consequences were not so good for that guy. He was thrown out, okay, because he did nothing with it. He did nothing with the resources that he was provided with. So there's an expectation that we are to do something with what God gives us. Very clear. So unfortunately, most men fall short in this very important area of responsibility. Most men fall short. And there's three primary reasons why they fall short. The first one is they have no financial game plan. No financial game plan. The second one is they have limited knowledge of money management. And the third one is a lack of understanding or a lack of the implications of them not doing well in this area with respect to their loved ones. When you begin to see that picture, believe me, trust me, it will shape the decisions that you make when you understand the implications with respect to your loved ones. I can speak of this because I was one of those guys. I was one of those guys. As Joe said, I grew up poor. We were on food stamps in junior high school and high school. I had no concept of money management. I had no role models to look at, whether it was my uncles or my mom or others. People lived paycheck to paycheck. Heck, I didn't even know how to manage a checkbook till I got married. My wife taught me how to do a checkbook, and I was a college graduate. Jan and I spent what we earned. We lived large. We were living up in Barrington Heights in West Lynn, a couple of new cars, 2 kids, and I had no concept of money management. We both earned nice incomes, but we spent it. And then in 1995, we had a total of $17,098 in our retirement account. That's all we had in 1995. I was 41 years old. 41 years old, 23 years old. And so after that point, during that same year, I met a guy by the name of Ray Urias. Ray was a bad dude. He would throw down with you in a heartbeat. If you cross this guy, let me just say you wouldn't want to cross this guy. But I met Ray because he was a customer of ours for the company I was working for at the time. Ray was an independent business owner in Eugene. He ran a screw machine shop. And he was very intriguing to me because he was street smart. No formal education. He was street smart. And the more I got to know Ray, I found out that Ray was a multi-millionaire. So it intrigued me more. And as I got to know him a little bit better, I began to ask questions. Well, how did you get to this point today? And we discussed in length, and he showed me about investing, what that looked like, about money management. And it created a thirst in me at that time that I never had before to learn more about investments, money management, what that looked like. So the outcome is over time, I did a lot of research, not only on the internet, but I got books to read with respect to investing. I also identified friends or people that I knew who did well financially, and I picked their brain because I was accumulating information. I knew I needed to do something. I had no role model. I was never mentored, but I had this thirst to learn. So here's what I learned from that whole experience after time. God expects us to be wise stewards of the resources He's put into our possession. I wish someone would have taught me at a young age about money management. How many of you in this room, and there's a few of you who are long in the tooth like me, have grandchildren or have children, and you never address these issues? If you have, that's awesome. But if you haven't, if they don't understand these important topics, they're going to grow up to be adults, and it's going to be very difficult for them to thrive over the long term. Very important. What you don't know will hurt you. Now, I grew up, my mother would say mijo, which is a loving Hispanic term. Mijo, what you don't know won't hurt you. I heard that growing up all the time. Only to become an adult and understand that what I don't know will hurt me, and what you don't know will hurt you as well. So it's imperative for us to learn. It's out there. Resources are incredible out there. Jan and I are totally transparent with our finances. Again, I'm summarizing what I've learned through this experience. We have one checkbook. We don't have two checkbooks. We're totally transparent with respect to our spending. We have a game plan, short-term, mid-term, long-term. We have a financial game plan. We have a budget. Not that we need a budget today, but we have a budget because it's a discipline that we have that we didn't have before. There are 4 legs to the stool of wealth, and I want you to dial in on this. It's very, very important. There are 4 legs to the stool of wealth. And if you get these will help you a great deal. The first one is time. And this is why it's so critically important for your children to learn early and your grandchildren to understand the concept of money management and investing. It's really, really important here. So let me give you a perspective. In 1995, the Dow Jones was 4,000. 4,000. What's the Dow Jones today?
26.
That's right, 26. Now, if you would have invested $10,000, there's some calculators that you can put some money into. Can you imagine that $10,000? If you would have invested that 23 years ago, when the Dow Jones was 4,000, today it's over 26 and change. Think how much that would be worth today. The second leg of the stool is spend less than you make. Now, I grew up in an environment where you spend what you make. If you increased over time, and most of the time salaries or your hourly wages will increase over time, people have a tendency to keep spending up to that limit. But if you can manage your expenses and spend less than you make, that's very, very important, because you take that difference and invest it. You just don't bury it under a mattress or put it in the ground, but you invest it to make something happen. Just like the 2 gentlemen in the parable of talents, you invest it. So investing is a big part. That's the third leg. The fourth leg, which is very important, is giving. It's giving. You cannot outgive God. And you don't give for the purpose of just getting more, but it just kind of happens that way. I can tell you from experience, and Joe, you've had this personal experience as well. So let me summarize those 4 legs to the stool of wealth. Time, If you start early, you start investing early, by the time you're in your mid-60s like me, you're probably going to be pretty well set. Secondly, spend less than you make. Third, invest the difference. And four, give. You can hoard it, but you got to give. It's like a stream. It's flowing through. Remember, these are resources that don't belong to you. They belong to God. He's allowing you, He's blessing you to influence others. Not only your immediate family, but others in need that no one should ever know about. Only between you and God. But you're now in a position when you've done these things well to be able to meet the needs of others without having to wave a banner and telling everybody, here's what I'm doing with this. Okay? But so giving is a very important part of it. You're never too old to start. You're never too old to start. You're never too old to learn. I was 41 years old, 23 years ago. You're never too old to start. You can always start. Have a financial game plan. It's critical to success. Don't wing it. If you fail to plan, plan to fail. We've heard that before, but it's so true. There's lots of resources available out there for you to tap into, whether it's on the internet. There's a tremendous amount of books with respect to money management, investing. Dave Ramsey has a fantastic series. I think you guys might do that at this church here. That is a great. I bought books. I've given those books away to others that have struggled in the area of finances. But it's so important, very important. So as I close on this subject, I want to share something with you, and this is not boasting. It's not. Please understand, because I'm using it as an example. Today, Jan and I are in the land of what Bob Brinker calls the land of critical mass. And basically that means is we work because we enjoy working. We don't have to work. We're set pretty much for the rest of our lives. We're pretty well set. And I only share that because 1995, with only having $17,098, today the picture is significantly different in 2018. So I wish I would have started when I was younger, but I'm glad I started when I did. So it's never too late to start, and that's my point here. Fellas, if you have this under control, awesome, great, fantastic. But if not, please give this matter consideration, because your family is depending on you. Your family is depending on you and me. It's critical. Okay, let's move to real leadership now. This is another expectation that God has of us. It's a very clear expectation to lead our families, not to follow, but to be out in front and to lead our families. A very, very clear expectation. Let's define the areas of leadership and what that looks like. Spiritual, financial, emotional, moral, and social. These are key areas of leadership that God expects every one of us. It's not an option. It's just not an option. But He expects us to lead in these areas. Unfortunately, many men struggle to provide leadership in these areas because, A, they don't recognize the needs. B, they are not equipped to address them. And C, because they've not earned the trust of their wives or children. And that hurts. It really hurts. There are a lot of men, and I'm sure every one of you in this room would love to have the trust of your wife and children on all occasions and others. And in some cases that may be reality for you, but in other cases it may not be. And there's a reason for that. So let me get to that. But I wanted to say this: it's impossible to lead others unless you have their respect and trust. It's impossible to lead others unless you have the respect and trust. So let's unpack this a little bit. Emerson Eggerichs, the best-selling author of Love and Respect, asserts, women need love, men need respect. A sampling of 400 men, or 74%, said if they were forced to choose, they would prefer feeling alone and unloved rather than feeling disrespected and inadequate. Men yearn respect. Think about whether you're at work or whether you're in an environment here at the church, wherever you're at. When you're with others and when you feel respected, if you've been given additional responsibility in your job environment, that feels pretty good, doesn't it? On the other hand, when you don't have that respect by others, it doesn't feel very good. So it's just natural that men yearn for respect. There's a book called The Leader's Code by Donovan Campbell, and there are 7 virtues he talks about in this book by great leadership. It's the best book on leadership that I've ever read, the very best book on leadership. And I'm going to cover some of those, so let's take a look at the screen here for a second. These are the 7 key virtues that are the foundation for effective leadership. Humility, excellence, kindness, discipline, courage, wisdom, mission, intentionality. They are the foundation of effective leadership. So let's look at this. Humility. Humility is thinking more about others than thinking about ourselves. Just reflect on that for a moment. When you're at home and you're asked to do something, do you always do it if it's going to cost you something? Or do you take the initiative to do something that you probably wouldn't normally do for your wife or your children or others in the act of humility, serving? Very important. Excellence. In everything you do, small or large, it's got your signature on it. It's an imperative. Oftentimes, we don't think that our children or wives or others are watching us. But they are. They're watching what we do every day. And if we do something half-hearted or 50%, they know that. It's important that we provide 100% excellence in everything we do, whether it's small or large. We are to give it our very best because it has our signature on it. Kindness. It's easy to extend kindness to someone who's kind to you, but how often do you extend kindness to someone who's not kind to you? Your children are watching. They're taking your cue. Your grandchildren are watching. They're taking your cue. Your wife is watching. They're taking our cue.
Your neighbors are watching too.
Your neighbors are watching. Thank you. Thank you for that. Discipline, self-control, especially when no one's looking. Are you disciplined enough that someone can always count on you? Are you disciplined enough that someone can always count on you? Again, your family's watching. Wisdom. Wisdom is the application of truth at all times, discernment. Do you pray for wisdom daily? If you don't, let me encourage you to pray for wisdom daily. Pray for wisdom, pray for purity, because the better decisions you make, others will see that, but it also will have a very positive impact, not only upon your life, but others as well. And finally, mission and intentionality, a roadmap to where you're going. If you fail to plan, plan to fail. Fellas, time is no respecter of man. Time is no respecter of man. Every day, every single one of us is given a certain amount of minutes. It's finite. It's a very finite number. And what you do with those minutes, if you optimize them, awesome. But if you don't, they're lost. They're lost, and you start all over the next day. So being intentional of what you do when you get up. What's your game plan today, fellas? Or tomorrow, or next week, or the week after? What's your game plan with your grandchildren, or your children, or your wife? Being intentional in what you do is so, so critical. These are 7 virtues that facilitate respect. Think about this. How quickly would you be willing to follow someone that doesn't exhibit these 7 virtues? I wouldn't. Probably not. And I would suspect that some of us, in fact, I'm just like you, we're all in the same boat, guys. We're all in the same boat. Are probably doing okay in some of these areas, and there's probably areas where we're not doing okay. So it's really, really important to, as we move forward, to self-assess where we're at. Pray for guidance from God with respect to you individually. Which of these areas do I need to focus more of my attention on? Where am I doing okay? Or where am I falling short? It's really important to understand that. I would encourage you to write these 7 virtues down as guideposts going forward. One of the books in the Bible that I love the most, the very favorite book of the Bible I like is Proverbs. And I love that book because it's practical application every single day for me to how to execute my life and be aligned with God. It's very, very important. Proverbs is an awesome book. If you're in it, awesome, but if you haven't read it, it has there's a lot of information in there that can be very helpful. So, fellas, move forward, be intentional, do not sit idle. And so finally, what does great leadership look like? Well, there are many different forms, but one is to be a rock and to be at the helm at all times. Now, many of you in this room have experienced tragedy. And if you haven't, it's coming. If you haven't, it will come. There may be a death in the family, maybe emergency, but tragedy will certainly occur. It is so paramount for men, and this is where God expects us to lead. When tragedy occurs and the family's upset and the balance is out of whack, and your wife and your children are emotionally upset, we have to step up. We have to be that rock at the helm. We have to be steady. Even though our feelings are upside down and we're being affected the same way, we have to be strong. We have to lead. We have to be someone our wives and children can count on. It's paramount. It's paramount. So, we often think of men such as George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King. These were all great men. They accomplished so many great things. And they exhibited a number of these attributes. There's no question about it. But I want you to consider the man who gets up every day and goes to work, provides for his family, and leads by example. Not just by what he says, but he's leading by example. Because our actions speak far louder than our words. By far. Consider the man who makes a choice to love his wife in good times and bad times, unwavering, never letting circumstances dictate their feelings. Consider the man who makes time for his children, just not quality time. There always used to be a buzzword a few years ago saying, quality time is more important than just time. And I want to say, that's not right. Spend time with your children, period. It's very, very important. Consider the man who puts the needs of his family first before his own. Consider the man who recognizes danger for his wife and children and takes the appropriate action to protect them. Who are your children's friends today? What are they doing? Do you know? Do you give thought to, are your wife's needs being met? How can you help? Are you an encourager? Are you a good listener? Consider the man who pursues wisdom from God's word each day so that he can be a life giver to his wife and children. These are the actions that I just summarized right now that earn the respect, thereby allowing your family and children and others to have a willingness to follow you if you embrace these very, very seriously. In closing, I began this presentation by introducing the word legacy and what that looked like. So, gentlemen, I'd like you to, as we close today, think about how is your legacy being shaped? We're only here for a specific period of time and then we're gone. What impact will you have on your loved ones and others? Make the difference. Thank you very much.
Can we ask questions?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Okay, like discipline is very important for yourself, for God, for us. Discipline ourselves for God. Discipline our families, our children, and through them they have less problems functioning in this world.
Yes.
The reason why I say that because I was a school teacher for 34 years. High school. The other thing I'd ask, have you ever heard of Ramsey's financial freedom?
Yeah, Dave, financial.
Yes.
Yeah, they're doing that right now in our
Right.
church.
Yeah.
I tried that in 1993, and I don't know anybody anything.
Mm-hmm.
The only person I owe is God.
Mm-hmm.
that in you in order to do something. You're the example.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it starts with you. It starts with us. It starts with us. Guys, we're all in the same boat. You know, we all have the same challenges. All of us do.
Right.
But one of the key inputs to our ability to navigate the challenges of every day, all of us have challenges every day. The more time you spend learning, gaining information, assessing where you're at in your walk with God, praying for wisdom, praying for leadership, it's all these things. That's going to help you become of a greater influence within your family more effectively, not just in the short term, but in the long term as well. Very, very important. Yes?
I, like yourself, grew up in Los Angeles with a single mother.
Yep.
I'm about 13 years ahead of you.
Okay.
But I never finished high school. What was there somebody that motivated you to finish high school, to go on to college?
Yeah, I played sports, I played football and so forth. So the guys I hung around with, many of them came from more homes that were, I'm going to say, better balanced, if you will, more secure. So I surrounded myself with athletes. They kind of motivated me. They were going to school, I was going to go to school. I remember waking up after the all-night party in high school. I was at Disneyland, all-night party, thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? I have no idea. Education wasn't valued in my family at all. My mom dropped out when she was in the 9th grade. My dad dropped out in the 10th grade, but he left when I was 5. There was only one person in my family, my aunt Evangeline, who graduated from high school. Everyone else dropped out. So education was not valued in my family. I don't have anything else to do. My friends are going away to college. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to see what that's like. Because when I was in high school, all I wanted to do was play sports. And I loved to play football, and a lot of good things happened from that, college and so forth. So I ended up going to college, checking it out. I went to a community college first before I went to a 4-year university, and I liked it. I grew up in Pico Rivera, so you know where that's at. It's a barrio. Very poor, tough, a lot of gangs in the area. So I just wanted something. I saw something different. I started going to parties, people I meet at college, and I saw things that I had never seen before. And I thought, I want that. I want to experience that. So that motivated me to finish school. The other thing is I started working when I was 14. Because I was Mexican, we were low income. Through the city of Pico Rivera, through NYC, they had a special program for poor families. They would get involved in parks and recreation. So when I got my first paycheck, I think I was making $1.10 an hour. That got me so psyched up because I earned something. I felt good. That had never happened before. And I remember I used to get my checks over to my mom, and she would give me some, and she'd keep the rest, which was the right thing to do. But I remember how good that felt. So having the ability to earn money and work hard started very young. And so when I graduated from college, when I went to work for a Fortune 500 company, they gave me the tools. Unfortunately, I worked for a company that didn't promote people based on age. They didn't promote people based on years of service. But they promoted people based on performance, And so I took the tools that were given to me, and I ran with them. And so I was on what they would call a fast track, and went through the ranks fairly quickly. So I realized very young, consequences of certain decisions I would make, and that just spurred me on to get it, finish college, first one in my family to finish school. So it's a long answer to your question, but that's what motivated me to continue to go on. Any other questions you might have?
I guess not.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all of you this morning. Thank you very much.
Yeah.